The mare's scream cut through the mountain air like a knife, and Helena Dawson knew in that instant she was about to lose everything she owned in this world. 4 riders had surrounded her on the narrow trail through the Wasatch Range, their faces hard beneath dusty hats, their intentions written in the way they eyed her sorrel mare with calculating greed. It was September of 1878, and Helena had been traveling alone from Salt Lake City toward Alta, Utah, carrying nothing but her most precious possession, a purebred Arabian mare worth more than most men earned in 5 years. The Rustlers had spotted her 2 miles back, and she had foolishly hoped she could outrun them on these treacherous mountain paths. "That's a fine piece of horseflesh you got there, miss," the leader said, his voice oily with false politeness. He was a lean man with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, and his hand rested casually on the pistol at his hip. "Seems a shame for a lady to be traveling alone with such valuable property. Dangerous country up here." Helena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm headed to Alta. My uncle's expecting me. He'll have noticed I'm late by now." It was a lie. Her uncle had died 3 months ago, leaving her his small mining claim, but these men did not need to know she had no one waiting for her arrival. "That so?" The scarred man nudged his horse closer. His 3 companions had formed a loose circle around her, blocking any escape route. "Well, we wouldn't want nothing bad to happen to you on account of that fine mare. Maybe you should let us take her off your hands. For safekeeping, you understand." "I understand you're thieves," Helena said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice, "and I'm not giving you my horse." The scarred man's false smile disappeared. "Wasn't really asking, miss. Now you can hand over them reins peaceful-like, or we can take them. Your choice, but I'd hate for a pretty thing like you to get hurt over a horse." Helena's hand moved toward the rifle in her saddle holster, but she knew she would never clear leather before they drew on her. The mare shifted beneath her, sensing her rider's fear, and Helena felt tears prick her eyes. This horse was all she had left. Her parents had died of influenza 2 years ago. Her uncle had passed, and she had sold everything else to make this journey west, betting her entire future on a mining claim she had never seen and a dream of independence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The voice came from above them, deep and calm, carrying an authority that made all 5 heads snap upward. Helena's breath caught as she saw him on an outcropping of rock about 15 feet up the slope. A massive man with shoulders that seemed to block out the sun, long dark hair falling past his shoulders, and a rifle held with casual expertise across his chest. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy shirt that could not hide the powerful build beneath, and even from this distance, Helena could see the sharp intelligence in his eyes. "This ain't your concern, mountain man," the scarred leader said, but Helena heard the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "We're just having a conversation with the lady." "Conversation's over." The stranger's voice remained calm, but something in it made Helena's spine tingle. This was not a man who made idle threats. "You boys are going to turn around and ride back down this mountain." One of the rustlers, a stocky man with a red bandana, spat on the ground. 4 against 1, friend. You might want to reconsider who's giving orders." 5 against 1, the mountain man corrected, his gaze flicking to Helena. "I'm thinking the lady's not on your side. But if you want to press your luck, go ahead and reach for those pistols. I'll drop 2 of you before you clear leather, and my guess is she'll account for a 3rd. He paused. "Of course, that still leaves 1 of you, and I'm curious which one of you wants to volunteer to be the survivor who has to explain to the rest of your gang how you got 3 of your friends killed over a horse." The 4 rustlers exchanged glances, and Helena saw the calculation in their eyes. The scarred leader's jaw worked as if he were chewing on something bitter. "That's a mighty fine horse," he said finally. "Worth a lot of money." "I can see that." The mountain man shifted his stance slightly, and Helena realized he was angling for a better shot. "Which is why I'm going to make you boys an offer. You want a valuable horse?" "I got one. Big roan gelding, 16 hands, strong as an ox, worth a good $200 to the right buyer. He's tied up about a quarter-mile back at my camp. You take him and leave the lady alone." Helena's mouth fell open. This stranger was offering to give these criminals his own horse to save hers. The scarred man looked suspicious. "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't need him as much as she needs that mare. I know this country. I can walk out if I have to. But a woman alone without a horse." He shook his head. "That's a death sentence. Besides, My horse is probably worth more than hers anyway. You boys would be getting the better end of the deal." "How do we know you're not lying?" the stocky rustler asked. "You don't. But you're not getting this lady's horse either way, so you can gamble on mine or you can ride away with nothing. Your choice, but you got about 10 seconds to make it before I start shooting." The scarred leader stared up at the mountain man for a long moment, then swore under his breath. "Show us this horse of yours. I'll do better than that." To Helena's shock, the mountain man began climbing down from the outcrop with surprising grace for such a large man. When he reached the trail, he was even more imposing than she had realized. He stood at least 6'3", with shoulders that looked like they could carry a full-grown deer and arms that bulged with muscle beneath his shirt. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth, and his dark eyes held a quiet confidence that made her feel safer, just standing near him. "Isaac Adler," he said, nodding to Helena before turning back to the rustlers. "My camp's this way. Lady, you stay behind me." Helena found herself obeying automatically, guiding her mare to follow as Isaac led the group up the trail. Her mind spun with questions. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? And why would he sacrifice his own horse for a complete stranger? They walked in tense silence for about 10 minutes before Isaac stopped at a small clearing just off the main trail. A magnificent roan gelding stood tied to a pine tree, his coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. He was indeed massive, easily one of the finest horses Helena had ever seen. "There he is," Isaac said, "saddle and all. You boys take him and go." The scarred leader rode closer, examining the horse with greedy eyes. "I'll be damned, you weren't lying." "I don't lie." Isaac's voice was flat. "Now we got a deal?" The rustler looked between the roan, Helena's mare, and the mountain man. Helena could see him weighing his options, wondering if he could somehow take both horses. But Isaac's hand had moved almost imperceptibly closer to his rifle, and something in his stance suggested he was ready to explode into violence at the slightest provocation. "We got a deal," the scarred man said finally. He dismounted and approached the roan cautiously, as if expecting a trick. When Isaac made no move to stop him, he untied the horse and swung into the saddle. "Pleasure doing business with you, mountain man." "Get out of here before I change my mind." The four rustlers did not need to be told twice. They turned their horses down the trail, the scarred leader now riding the roan, and within moments they had disappeared around a bend. Helena watched them go, her entire body trembling with delayed shock. "They're gone," Isaac said quietly. "You're safe now." Helena turned to look at him, and suddenly her knees went weak. The fear, the adrenaline, the sheer terror of the last half hour crashed over her all at once, and she found herself gripping her saddle horn to stay upright. "Easy there." Isaac's hand was suddenly on her arm, steadying her with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "You're all right. Take a breath." "You gave them your horse," Helena said, and her voice came out as barely a whisper. "You saved my life and gave them your horse." "Wasn't using him anyway." Isaac's tone was casual, but Helena saw the concern in his eyes as he studied her face. "You look like you could use some water. There's a stream just over that rise." "I can't just leave you here without a horse," Helena protested, even as he guided her toward the sound of running water. "You said yourself a person alone in these mountains without a horse is a death sentence." "I said that about a woman alone. I know every inch of these mountains. I'll manage." They reached the stream, and Isaac helped her dismount. Her legs were still shaking, and she was grateful for his steady hand on her elbow. He produced a tin cup from his pack and filled it with cold, clear water, pressing it into her hands. "Drink," he ordered. Helena drank, the icy water helping to clear her head. She studied Isaac over the rim of the cup, taking in the weathered face, the long hair, the powerful build. He looked like something out of a story, like the mountain men she had read about in dime novels back east, the kind of man who could survive anything the wilderness threw at him. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'm Helena Dawson, and I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything." Isaac crouched by the stream, filling his own cup. "I was in the right place at the right time. That's all." "That's not all." Helena set down her cup, feeling some of her strength returning. "You gave those criminals a horse worth at least $200, maybe more, and you did it for a complete stranger." Isaac was quiet for a moment, staring into the rushing water. "I've known men like that scarred fellow. They weren't going to leave without taking something, and I wasn't going to let them take anything from you. A horse is just a horse. I can get another one." "Where were you headed?" Helena asked. "Before this happened?" "Nowhere in particular. I trap these mountains, hunt, trade with the miners sometimes. I go where I want when I want." He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw a hint of a smile on his weathered face. "Free as a bird. And now you're stuck on foot because of me. I'm not stuck. I'm just changing my plans a little." He stood, and Helena had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Where were you headed? Alta, you said?" "Yes. My uncle left me a mining claim there. He died 3 months ago, and I've been settling his affairs in Salt Lake City. I was on my way to see the property when those men found me." "You planning to work a mining claim by yourself?" Isaac's tone was skeptical, but not unkind. "I'm planning to try. I don't have many other options." Helena lifted her chin, defiant despite her exhaustion. "My parents are gone, my uncle's gone, and I have about $50 to my name beyond this horse and that claim. So yes, I'm going to Alta, and yes, I'm going to try to work that mine, and no, I don't need anyone telling me it's foolish." To her surprise, Isaac's smile widened. "Wasn't going to say it was foolish. Takes courage to strike out alone like that, but it is dangerous, especially with men like those Rustlers around. You were lucky I was nearby." "I know." Helena felt her defiance drain away, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. "I thought I was going to lose everything. That mare is the only thing of value I have left. My father bred Arabians back in Illinois before he got sick. She's from his last bloodline." Isaac's expression softened. "Then I'm glad I could help. Come on, let me get you back on that trail. Alta's still a good 3 hours ride from here, and you don't want to be caught on the mountain after dark. What about you?" Helena caught his arm as he turned. "You can't just walk back down the mountain. Let me take you to Alta. You can ride with me." Isaac looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "You want me to ride double with you? That mare's carrying enough as it is." "She's strong. She can manage 2 riders for 3 hours, especially if one of them isn't carrying much gear." Helena surprised herself with her insistence, but the thought of leaving this man alone in the wilderness after he had saved her felt wrong. "Please, it's the least I can do." Isaac studied her for a long moment, and Helena had the unsettling feeling he was seeing right through her, reading every thought in her head. Finally he nodded. "All right, but only because Alta's on my way anyway. I was planning to head down there for supplies next week. This just moves up my schedule." Relief flooded through Helena. "Thank you. You're going to wear out those words." Isaac went to gather what little gear he had in his camp, a pack with some basic supplies, his rifle, and a heavy coat. Helena watched the way he moved, efficient and purposeful, every motion speaking of years spent living in harsh country. When he returned, he secured his pack to her saddle and then looked at the mare with a practiced eye. "She's a beauty," he said, running a hand down the horse's neck. "Your father knew his breeding." "He did." Helena felt a lump form in her throat. "Her name is Saffron, after the spice, my mother's idea." "Saffron." Isaac tested the name. "Suits her." He turned to Helena. "You mount up first. I'll swing on behind you." Helena pulled herself into the saddle, and then Isaac placed one foot in the stirrup and swung up behind her with surprising ease for such a large man. The saddle suddenly felt very small with both of them in it, and Helena was acutely aware of the solid warmth of his body pressed against her back, his arms coming around her sides to help keep his balance. "Sorry," he said, his voice rumbling close to her ear. "Not much room." "It's fine." Helena tried to keep her voice steady, but her heart was racing for an entirely different reason now. She had never been this close to a man before, certainly not one like Isaac Adler. The sheer physical presence of him was overwhelming, the heat radiating from his body, the smell of leather and pine, and something else distinctly masculine, the weight of his muscular frame behind her. She clicked her tongue, and Saffron moved forward, adjusting easily to the extra weight. The trail wound through towering pines and aspens, the afternoon sun filtering through the leaves in golden shafts. Under different circumstances, Helena might have found the journey beautiful, but she could not stop thinking about the man riding behind her. "How long have you been in these mountains?" she asked, partly out of curiosity and partly to break the charged silence. "About 7 years. Came west after the war ended, did some scouting for the army, then decided I liked the solitude. Been trapping and hunting up here ever since. Don't you get lonely? Isaac was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. But I found I prefer the company of mountains to the company of most men. Present company accepted, of course. Helena felt herself smile despite everything. You mean I'm better company than a mountain? Considerably better. There was warmth in his voice that made her pulse quicken. Though mountains don't ask as many questions. I'll try to contain my curiosity. Helena guided Saffron around a fallen log. It's just that I've never met anyone like you before. In Illinois, men like you only existed in storybooks. Men like me? Mountain men, trappers, people who live free in the wilderness. She hesitated. Heroes who save foolish women from rustlers. I'm no hero, Helena. I just did what any decent person would do. Most decent people wouldn't have given up their horse. Most decent people wouldn't have had a horse to give up. Isaac shifted slightly behind her, and Helena felt the solid muscle of his chest against her back. I meant what I said. I know these mountains. I'll get another horse, probably from one of the miners in Alta. It's not a hardship. They rode in silence for a while, the steady rhythm of Saffron's hooves the only sound besides the wind in the pines. Helena found herself relaxing despite herself, lulled by the warmth of Isaac's presence and the fading adrenaline. She had been so alone for so long, carrying the weight of her grief and her uncertain future by herself, that having someone strong and capable at her back felt like a gift she had not known she needed. Tell me about this mine of your uncle's, Isaac said eventually. You know anything about it? Not much. He wrote me a few letters over the years, said he had a claim up near Alta that showed promise. Silver, mostly. But he was always vague about the details. Helena sighed. I'm hoping the assay office in town will have records. I'm hoping there's actually something worth working. I'm hoping I'm not chasing a dream that died with him. And if there's nothing there? It was the question Helena had been avoiding for weeks. I don't know. I suppose I'll figure something out. Maybe work in town, save money, try again somewhere else. She tried to sound confident, but her voice wavered. I'm not going back to Illinois. There's nothing for me there. Isaac's hand came to rest lightly on her arm, a gesture of comfort. You're stronger than you think if you made it this far. Most women in your position would have given up already. Most women in my position would have had family to fall back on, or a husband. The words came out more bitter than Helena intended. I don't have those luxuries. Might be a luxury you don't want anyway. I've seen plenty of marriages that looked more like prisons than partnerships. Spoken like a true bachelor. Helena glanced back over her shoulder, catching a glimpse of his profile. Have you ever been married? No. Came close once, back before the war. But she married someone else while I was away fighting. He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Probably for the best. I'm not the settling down type. You don't think you'll ever want a family? Isaac was quiet for so long that Helena thought he might not answer. Then, I think I wanted it once, but that was a different life. The man I am now, the life I live, it's not the kind of life you bring a wife and children into. Too hard, too isolated, too dangerous. Helena felt an unexpected pang of disappointment at his words, though she could not say why. What did it matter to her if Isaac Adler never wanted a family? She had known the man for less than 2 hours. The trail began to descend more steeply, and the trees thinned out to reveal a valley below. Helena could see buildings clustered along a river. Alta, at last. Almost there, Isaac said. You'll want to find a place to stable Saffron first thing. There's a good livery run by a man named Thomas Jensen. Tell him Isaac sent you. He'll give you a fair price. You're not staying in town? Helena tried to keep the disappointment from her voice. Depends. I might stick around a day or two, get some supplies, see about buying another horse. But I'm not much for civilization, even a small town like Alta. He paused. Why? You worried about those rustlers coming back? A little, Helena admitted. I keep thinking about that scarred man, the way he looked at Saffron. I'm worried they might try again once you're not around. Isaac's arms tightened almost imperceptibly around her. I won't let anything happen to you. The simple conviction in his words made Helena's breath catch. She twisted to look at him fully, and found his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that sent heat flooding through her body. You can't protect me forever, she said softly. You have your own life to live. Maybe, Isaac held her gaze, but I can protect you until I'm sure you're safe. I didn't give up my horse just to have those bastards come back and finish what they started. They entered Alta as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The town was small but bustling, with miners and merchants going about their business in the dusty streets. Helena guided Saffron toward the livery Isaac had mentioned, very aware of the curious glances they drew. A dusty young woman and a massive mountain man riding double into town. Thomas Jensen turned out to be a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a ready smile. His face lit up when he saw Isaac. "Isaac Adler, as I live and breathe," he called out. "Haven't seen you in 3 months. Thought maybe a bear finally got you." "Not yet." Isaac dismounted with fluid grace and then helped Helena down, his large hands spanning her waist easily. "Tom, this is Helena Dawson. She's going to need to stable her mare, and I'm going to need to buy a horse if you've got one to sell." Tom's eyebrows rose. "What happened to that roan of yours? That was a fine animal." "Had to trade him." Isaac's voice was deliberately casual. "Long story. You got anything available?" While Tom and Isaac discussed horses, Helena saw to Saffron's care, making sure the mare had fresh water and feed. Her hands shook as she worked, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. She was alone in a strange town, with barely any money, relying on the kindness of a man she had just met. What was she doing? "You all right?" Isaac's voice startled her. He had appeared at her elbow without making a sound. "Just tired," Helena forced a smile. "It's been a long day. Tom says there's a boarding house on Main Street run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. Clean rooms, decent food, fair prices. I'll walk you over there." "You don't have to. I'm walking you over there." Isaac's tone left no room for argument. He collected her small bag from Saffron's saddle and nodded toward the door. "Come on. You need rest and a hot meal." Helena found herself following him again, struck by how easy it was to let this man take charge. It should have bothered her. She had spent the last 2 years learning to be independent, to rely on herself, but instead, she felt only relief. For one evening, she could let someone else be strong. Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house was a neat 2-story building with white curtains in the windows and a small garden out front. The widow herself was a plump woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Helena of her mother. She looked Helena up and down, then glanced at Isaac. "She looks half dead on her feet, Isaac Adler. What have you been doing to this poor girl?" "Saving her from rustlers, mostly." Isaac set down Helena's bag. "She needs a room and a hot meal. Can you help her?" Mrs. Fletcher's expression softened immediately. "Rustlers? Good Lord. Come in, dear, come in. I've got a room on the 2nd floor, nice and quiet, and supper will be ready in an hour." "Thank you." Helena felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness. "I can pay. We'll settle accounts in the morning. Right now you need to get cleaned up and rest." Mrs. Fletcher took Helena's arm gently. "Isaac, you staying for supper?" Isaac hesitated, glancing at Helena. Something passed between them, a question and an answer without words. "If you've got room for one more," he said finally, "I always have room for you. Now, shoo, while I get this girl settled." Mrs. Fletcher led Helena upstairs to a small but clean room with a real bed and a wash basin. It was simple, but felt like luxury after the rough trail. "There's water in the pitcher," Mrs. Fletcher said. "I'll bring up some hot water in a few minutes so you can wash properly. Take your time, dear. You're safe here." When the door closed behind the widow, Helena sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Not sobs, just quiet tears of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. She had been so close to losing everything. If Isaac had not appeared when he did, she would have lost Saffron, been left stranded on that mountain trail, probably died trying to walk to Alta. Instead, she was here, safe, with food and shelter waiting for her. And Isaac Adler was downstairs, staying for supper, staying to make sure she was all right. Helena wiped her eyes and stood, moving to the wash basin. She caught sight of herself in the small mirror above it and barely recognized the woman staring back. Dusty, disheveled, with wild eyes and flushed cheeks, she looked like she had been through a war. But she was alive, and tomorrow she would start figuring out what came next. True to her word, Mrs. Fletcher returned with hot water and some clean towels. "Take your time, dear. Supper's in 30 minutes if you're feeling up to it." Helena washed quickly, scrubbing away the trail dust and changing into the one clean dress she had in her bag. It was simple brown cotton, nothing fancy, but at least it was not covered in dust. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up, trying to look presentable. She came downstairs. She found the dining room already occupied by several boarders, 2 miners who looked like brothers, an elderly gentleman who Mrs. Fletcher introduced as Mr. Caldwell, and Isaac, who had cleaned up as well and now sat at the head of the table looking decidedly uncomfortable in civilized surroundings. His eyes found Helena immediately, and something in his expression shifted. She realized he was seeing her properly for the first time, not as a frightened woman on a horse, but as herself. The intensity of his gaze made her skin flush. "You clean up nice," he said simply. "So do you." It was true. Without the trail dust, she could see the strong lines of his face more clearly, the depth of his dark eyes, the way his broad shoulders filled out his clean shirt. He was stunning in a rough, untamed way that made her heart skip. Supper was simple but delicious. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from Mrs. Fletcher's garden. Helena discovered she was ravenous and ate more than she had in days while the conversation flowed around her. The 2 miners, Jake and Samuel Parker, were friendly and curious about the newcomer to town. "You said you inherited a mining claim?" Samuel asked. "Which one? We know most of the operations around here." "The Dawson claim. It was my uncle's, Robert Dawson." Jake and Samuel exchanged glances. "We knew Bob," Jake said carefully. "He was a good man. Kept to himself mostly, but always fair in his dealings. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. Did you know anything about his claim, whether it was producing?" Samuel scratched his beard. "Bob was always tight-lipped about that, but I know he was still working it up until a few weeks before he died. That suggests he thought there was something there worth digging for." "Where's the claim exactly?" "Up canyon, about 2 miles past the edge of town. There's a trail that follows the river. You can't miss it." Jake hesitated. "Miss Dawson, I don't mean to be forward, but are you planning to work that claim yourself?" "That's my intention, yes." "It's hard work mining, dangerous work. Most women aren't most women." "Dodge," Isaac cut in quietly. His dark eyes were fixed on Jake with an expression that made the miner shift uncomfortably. "Helena's tougher than you think." The use of her first name, the casual intimacy of it, sent warmth through Helena's chest. Isaac barely knew her, but he was defending her anyway. "I'm sure she is," Jake said quickly. "I just meant that if she needs help or advice, me and Samuel would be happy to lend a hand, neighborly-like." "That's very kind," Helena smiled at him. "I'll definitely take you up on that once I've had a chance to see what I'm working with." The rest of the meal passed pleasantly, with Mr. Caldwell regaling them with stories from his days as a surveyor and Mrs. Fletcher fussing over everyone like a mother hen. But Helena found her attention continually drawn back to Isaac, who sat quietly through most of the conversation, his presence somehow dominating the room despite his silence. After supper, Mrs. Fletcher shooed everyone out of the dining room so she could clean up, and Helena found herself standing on the front porch with Isaac as the last light faded from the sky. The evening air was cool and crisp, smelling of pine and wood smoke. "Thank you for staying," Helena said softly. "I know you'd rather be back in the mountains." Isaac leaned against the porch railing, his eyes on the darkening peaks in the distance. "Maybe, but I wanted to make sure you were settled." He turned to look at her. "What are you going to do tomorrow?" "Visit the assay office, see if there are any records about my uncle's claim. Then I suppose I'll ride up and take a look at the mine itself." She hesitated. "Would you come with me? I know I'm asking a lot, but I'd feel safer with you there, at least until I know what I'm dealing with." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, and Helena held her breath. She knew she had no right to ask for more of his help, but the thought of facing that mine alone terrified her. "I'll come," he said finally. "I told you, I'm not leaving until I know you're safe. That includes making sure your uncle's claim isn't sitting on top of someone else's trouble." Relief flooded through Helena. "Thank you. Again. I feel like all I do is thank you." "You don't need to thank me." Isaac pushed off from the railing and took a step closer to her. In the dim light from the windows, his face was all shadows and angles, his dark eyes intense. "Helena, I need you to understand something. Those rustlers today, they weren't just after your horse. Men like that, they see a woman alone as easy prey. You can't be too careful." "I know." Helena's voice came out as barely a whisper. He was standing so close now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the clean scent of soap on his skin. "That's why I'm grateful you're here." Isaac lifted one hand as if to touch her face, then seemed to think better of it and let it drop. "Get some rest. We'll head to the assay office in the morning." He turned to leave, but Helena caught his arm. "Where are you staying?" "I've got a bedroll. I'll probably camp outside of town." "That's ridiculous. Mrs. Fletcher has rooms." "I'm not much for sleeping indoors." Isaac's smile was gentle. "I'll be fine. Besides, someone should keep an eye out for those rustlers. If they come looking for you, they'll have to go through me first." The thought of Isaac standing guard over her all night made Helena's chest tight with an emotion she could not quite name. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." He covered her hand with his own, his palm rough and warm against her skin. "Sleep well, Helena." Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness with the silent grace of a big cat. Helena stood on the porch for a long time, her hand still tingling from his touch, her mind spinning. She barely knew Isaac Adler. They had met only hours ago under the worst circumstances. But already she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before, as if some invisible thread connected them. She thought about his words. "I'm not the settling down type." She thought about the way he had looked at her over supper, the way he had defended her, the way his hand had felt on her waist when he helped her down from Saffron. She thought about the fact that he had given up his horse for her and was now planning to sleep outside to keep her safe. This was dangerous. This was foolish. This was everything she should not be feeling. But she felt it anyway. Helena finally went inside and climbed the stairs to her room. She lay down on the soft bed, her body exhausted but her mind racing. Through the window, she could see the dark shapes of the mountains against the starlit sky, and somewhere out there, Isaac Adler was standing watch. She fell asleep thinking about dark eyes and strong hands, and a deep voice saying her name. Morning came too soon. Helena woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of fresh coffee wafting up from downstairs. For a moment she was disoriented, forgetting where she was, but then the events of yesterday came rushing back. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Mrs. Fletcher already bustling about the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks." It was true. Despite everything, Helena had slept deeply, feeling safe for the first time since leaving Salt Lake City. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Nonsense. You're a guest. Sit down and have some coffee. Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes." Helena poured herself a cup of strong black coffee and sat at the table. Through the kitchen window, she could see the street beginning to come alive with early morning activity. She wondered where Isaac was, whether he had slept at all. Her question was answered a few minutes later when there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Fletcher answered it and returned with Isaac in tow, looking none the worse for a night spent outdoors. "Morning," he said to Helena. "Ready to visit the assay office?" "Let the girl eat breakfast first, Isaac," Mrs. Fletcher chided. "You mountain men, always in such a hurry." Isaac's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Yes, madam." They ate breakfast with the other boarders, and then Helena and Isaac set out for the assay office. Alta was fully awake now, with miners heading to their claims and merchants opening their shops. Helena was very aware of the looks they drew. Isaac towered over most men on the street, his long hair and buckskin clothes marking him as different, and she walked beside him feeling both protected and self-conscious. The assay office was a small building near the center of town, run by a thin man with spectacles named Arthur Mills. He looked up from his ledger as they entered, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of Isaac. "Mr. Adler, I haven't seen you in Alta for months. What brings you to town?" "Helping Miss Dawson here. She inherited Robert Dawson's claim." Arthur's expression turned sympathetic. "Ah, yes. Bob was a good fellow. I was sorry to hear of his passing." He turned to Helena. "What can I do for you, Miss Dawson?" "I'm trying to find out more about my uncle's claim. Any records you might have. Assay reports, that sort of thing. Arthur nodded and began pulling files from a cabinet. Bob was meticulous about his paperwork. Let me see what we have. He spread several documents across the counter, and Helena leaned in to study them. The claim was registered in her uncle's name, with clear boundaries marked. There were also several assay reports showing decent silver content in the ore samples. These numbers look promising, Arthur said, pointing to one particular report from 2 months ago. Bob had hit a vein here that was running about 20 ounces per ton. That's not rich by any means, but it's solid, enough to make a living if you work it steady. Hope flared in Helena's chest. So the mine is actually producing? Was producing, at least as of Bob's last report. Whether the vein continues, that's hard to say without seeing it yourself. Arthur hesitated. Miss Dawson, I don't mean to pry, but do you have experience in mining? It's specialized work. I'll learn. Helena lifted her chin. My uncle thought there was something worth working for. I owe it to him to at least try. She won't be alone, Isaac added quietly. I'll help her get started. Helena turned to look at him, surprised. He'd not mentioned anything about helping with the actual mining, only about checking out the claim. But he met her gaze steadily, and she saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. Well then, Arthur said, clearly relieved. In that case, you should be fine. The claim is about 2 miles up canyon. There's a cabin there where Bob lived. It's rough, but serviceable. And the mine entrance is another 100 yards past that. He gave them detailed directions and copies of the relevant documents. Helena thanked him profusely, her hands shaking slightly as she folded the papers and tucked them into her bag. She actually had a chance. This might actually work. They stepped back out into the sunlight, and Helena turned to Isaac. You told him you'd help me. You didn't have to do that. I know. Isaac started walking toward the livery, and Helena hurried to keep up with his long strides. But I'm not going to leave you alone up there until I'm sure it's safe and you know what you're doing. Isaac, I can't ask you to give up more of your time. He stopped abruptly and turned to face her, and the intensity in his expression made her breath catch. You're not asking. I'm offering. Helena, those rustlers are still out there. That scarred man knew your horse, which means he's probably been watching the trails, looking for easy targets. Until I'm certain they've moved on, I'm not leaving you alone. And after that? The question came out before Helena could stop it. After you're certain I'm safe, you'll just disappear back into the mountains? Isaac's jaw tightened. That's the plan. It should not have hurt. Helena had known from the start that Isaac was not the staying type, that he had only helped her out of basic decency. But hearing him confirm it, hearing the finality in his voice, felt like a door closing. Fine, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Then let's go look at this mine. They collected Saffron and the horse Isaac had purchased from Tom, a sturdy gray gelding named Storm, and rode out of town following Arthur's directions. The trail followed the river up through a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep and rocky on either side. It was beautiful country, wild and untamed, and Helena could see why Isaac loved these mountains. The cabin appeared after about 40 minutes of riding, nestled in a small clearing beside the creek. It was rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney, the kind of structure built by a man who valued function over form. But it looked solid, and when they dismounted and went inside, Helena found it was actually better than she had expected. One main room with a fireplace, a loft for sleeping, a table and chairs, and various mining equipment stored along one wall. Your uncle knew what he was doing, Isaac said, examining the tools. He's got picks, shovels, a good lantern, and even some black powder, everything you need to work a mine. Helena moved through the cabin slowly, touching her uncle's belongings, feeling the weight of his absence. He had lived here alone, working his claim, hoping to strike it rich, and he had died before he could see what came of it. I wish I had known him better, she said softly. He was my father's brother, but they had a falling out years ago over something stupid. By the time my parents died, Uncle Robert was already out west. We exchanged letters, but I never visited. I should have visited. Isaac came to stand beside her. He left you this claim. That says he cared about you. Or he had no one else to leave it to. Helena blinked back tears. Either way, I'm going to honor his work. I'm going to make this mine produce. Then let's go see what we're dealing with. The mine entrance was exactly where Arthur had said it would be. A dark opening in the rock face about 100 yards past the cabin. Isaac lit the lantern and led the way inside, and Helena followed, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The tunnel was narrow, but well shored with timber, descending at a gentle angle into the mountain. The air was cool and damp, smelling of earth and stone. After about 50 feet, the tunnel opened into a small chamber where her uncle had been working. Isaac held up the lantern, examining the walls. "See this?" He pointed to a vein of lighter rock running through the darker stone. "That's the silver ore. Your uncle was following it in." Helena stepped closer, running her fingers over the rough surface. It did not look like much, just slightly different colored rock, but according to the assay reports, this was worth 20 ounces per ton. "How do I get it out?" she asked. "The hard way. Pick and shovel, bit by bit. You break off chunks of ore, haul them out in buckets, then either process them yourself or take them to a stamp mill to be crushed and refined." Isaac's voice echoed slightly in the confined space. "It's backbreaking work, Helena, and dangerous. One mistake with the black powder or one weak timber in the ceiling, and you could be buried alive." Helena looked at him in the flickering lamplight. "Are you trying to discourage me?" "I'm trying to make sure you know what you're getting into." He moved closer, his expression serious. "I believe you can do this, but I need you to understand the risks." "I understand them." Helena met his gaze steadily. "And I'm still going to try. Will you teach me? At least the basics, enough to get started safely." Isaac studied her face for a long moment, and Helena had the feeling he was making some kind of decision that went deeper than just teaching her about mining. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'll teach you." They spent the rest of the day at the mine. Isaac showed Helena how to identify good ore versus waste rock, how to use the picks and shovels safely, how to check the timber shoring for weak spots. He was a patient teacher, demonstrating each technique and then watching carefully as she tried it herself, correcting her grip or her stance with gentle touches that made her skin tingle. By late afternoon, Helena's arms ached and her hands were blistered despite her gloves, but she had managed to break off several chunks of ore and haul them out to the entrance. It was not much, maybe 10 pounds of rock, but it was a start. "That's enough for today," Isaac said, noting her exhaustion. "Mining's not a sprint. You have to pace yourself or you'll burn out in a week." They rode back to town in the golden evening light, both of them quiet. Helena's mind was spinning with everything she had learned, already planning how she would organize her work at the mine. But beneath that practical thinking was a growing awareness of Isaac riding beside her, the easy way he sat his horse, the quiet confidence in everything he did. When they reached Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, Isaac helped her dismount and walked her to the door. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll go back up tomorrow and I'll show you more." "Tomorrow?" Helena could not keep the surprise from her voice. "You're staying another day?" "I'm staying until you can handle that mine on your own." Isaac's dark eyes were unreadable. "Could be a few days, could be a week. Depends how quickly you learn." Helena's heart swelled with something she was afraid to name. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough anymore." "Then stop saying it." Isaac's hand came up to brush a smudge of dirt from her cheek, his calloused fingertips gentle against her skin. The touch lingered a moment longer than necessary, and Helena felt her breath catch. "Isaac, get inside." His voice was rough. "I'll see you in the morning." He walked away before she could say anything else, and Helena stood on the porch watching him go, her cheek still tingling where he had touched her. Something was happening between them, something neither of them seemed quite ready to acknowledge. But it was there, growing stronger with every passing hour, and Helena had no idea what to do about it. The next week fell into a pattern. Each morning, Helena and Isaac would ride up to the mine together. He would teach her new skills, how to properly place charges of black powder, how to shore up a tunnel, how to sort her efficiently, how to keep accurate records. And each evening they would ride back to town, tired and dirty, to eat supper at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. The work was grueling. Helena's muscles screamed in protest every morning, and despite her gloves, her hands developed calluses on top of calluses. But she also felt herself growing stronger, more capable, more confident. And always, Isaac was there beside her, patient and encouraging, his presence a constant source of strength. They talked while they worked, sharing stories from their pasts. Isaac told her about growing up in Missouri, about fighting in the war, about coming west to escape the memories. Helena told him about her childhood in Illinois, about her parents' horse farm, about watching them die slowly of influenza while she was powerless to help. "That's why you couldn't let those rustlers take Saffron," Isaac said one afternoon as they sat outside the cabin eating lunch. "She's not just a horse, she's your last connection to your family." "She's all I have left of my father's dream." Helena's voice was quiet. "He spent 20 years building that bloodline. When he got sick, he sold everything except her. He made me promise I'd keep her, breed her someday, carry on what he started." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "That's a heavy burden to carry." "It's the only burden I have left." Helena looked at him. "Everyone I loved is gone. The farm is sold. That mare and this mine are my only chances to build something, to be someone. I can't fail." "You won't." Isaac's certainty was absolute. "You're too stubborn to fail." Helena laughed despite herself. "Is that a compliment?" "From me, yes." Isaac's rare smile appeared. "Stubborn is good. Stubborn keeps you alive in country like this." As the days passed, Helena found herself watching Isaac more and more, noticing little things about him. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he bent over his work. The way his muscles flexed beneath his shirt when he swung a pick. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was happening more often. The way he always positioned himself between her and any potential danger, even something as simple as a loose rock overhead. She noticed, too, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. The way his gaze would linger on her face, soft with something she was afraid to interpret. The way he found excuses to touch her, steadying her elbow in the dark tunnel, adjusting her grip on a tool, brushing dirt from her hair. One evening, after a particularly long day at the mine, they were riding back to town when a sudden summer storm rolled in over the mountains. The sky darkened in minutes, and rain began to fall in sheets, soaking them both instantly. "There's an overhang up ahead," Isaac shouted over the thunder. "We can wait it out there." He led them off the trail to a shallow cave formed by an overhanging cliff. It was barely deep enough for both horses and both riders, but at least it was dry. They dismounted and pressed back against the rock wall as the storm raged outside, lightning splitting the sky in brilliant white forks. Helena was shaking, whether from cold or adrenaline she could not say. Her dress clung to her body and her hair had come loose from its braid, hanging in wet ropes down her back. "Here." Isaac shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, and it smelled like him, leather and pine and something indefinably masculine. "You'll freeze," Helena protested, but her fingers were already clutching the coat around her. "I've been colder." Isaac stood close beside her, blocking the wind. "Are you all right?" "Just cold and wet, and probably foolish for not watching the weather more carefully. The storms come up fast in these mountains. No way to predict them sometimes." Isaac was looking down at her, and even in the dim light she could see the intensity in his eyes. "Helena, there's something I need to tell you." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "Those rustlers. I saw them in town yesterday." Fear shot through Helena. "You what? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because they didn't see me, and they didn't see you. They were buying supplies, probably planning to head out of the area. But Helena, the scarred one, he was asking about you, asking if anyone had seen a woman with an Arabian mare." Helena felt her knees go weak. "They're still looking for Saffron." "They're still looking." Isaac's voice was grim. "Which means you're not safe yet, not until they move on, or I make them move on." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not leaving Alta, not yet." Isaac's hands came up to rest on her shoulders, his touch burning through the wet fabric of her dress. "I thought maybe I could teach you what you needed to know and then head back to the mountains, but I can't leave you here alone knowing those men are still around." Helena stared up at him, her mind racing. "Isaac, I can't ask you to stay indefinitely. You have your own life. I don't have anything that matters more than making sure you're safe." The words came out rough, almost angry. "Do you understand that? In the past week, you've become more important to me than anything else in my life, and I don't know what the hell to do about it." Helena's breath caught. "Isaac, I know I'm not the kind of man you should want. I know I've got nothing to offer you except a hard life in these mountains. I know I should keep my distance and let you build your life here without me complicating things." His hands tightened on her shoulders. but I can't seem to make myself leave." Helena felt tears prick her eyes, mixing with the rain on her face. "What if I don't want you to leave?" Isaac went very still. "What?" "What if I don't want you to leave?" Helena's voice was barely a whisper. "What if in the past week you've become the most important person in my life too? What if I wake up every morning excited to see you and go to sleep every night wishing you were closer? What if I've fallen for a mountain man who thinks he has nothing to offer when really he's offering me everything I never knew I needed?" For a long moment, Isaac just stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face. Then, with a low sound that might have been a groan, he pulled her against him and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate, tasting of rain and need and something wild that took Helena's breath away. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her almost off her feet, and she melted into him, her fingers tangling in his long hair. The kiss went on and on, years of loneliness and loss pouring out of both of them, transmuting into something bright and fierce and achingly beautiful. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "This is crazy," he said, but he did not let her go. "Probably." Helena's hands were still fisted in his shirt. "I've known you barely more than a week. You're trying to build a life here. You don't need a wanderer like me dragging you down." "Maybe I need exactly that." Helena pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Isaac, I came west because I had nothing left in Illinois. No family, no home, no future. I was running away as much as running toward something. But now I have a mind that might actually produce, a town that seems welcoming, and a man who gave up his horse to save mine. A man who spent a week teaching me how to survive. A man who looks at me like I'm precious." Her voice broke. "Don't tell me I don't need that." Isaac's thumb traced the line of her jaw, achingly gentle. "You are precious. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. You're brave and stubborn and determined. And watching you work that mine this past week has been—" He shook his head. "I didn't think I'd ever want to stay in one place. I didn't think I'd ever want to build something with someone. But Helena, when I think about leaving you, it feels like cutting off my own arm." "Then don't leave." Helena's hands came up to frame his face. "Stay. Help me work the mine. Build something with me. We'll figure out the rest as we go. You're asking me to completely change my life. I'm asking you to start a new one. With me." Helena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Isaac, I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but sometimes you just know, don't you? Sometimes you meet someone and everything just clicks into place, and all the logical reasons why it shouldn't work don't matter because your heart knows the truth." Isaac closed his eyes, and Helena saw the war being waged across his face. Then he opened them again, and the decision was there in his gaze. "Yeah," he said softly, "sometimes you just know." He kissed her again, slower this time, tender and sweet, and Helena felt something settle in her chest, a rightness she had never experienced before. This was where she was meant to be, with this man, in these mountains, building a life from nothing. The storm passed eventually, and they rode back to town in comfortable silence, their hands occasionally brushing as they rode side by side. When they reached Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, Isaac walked Helena to the door, as always, but this time when he said good night, he kissed her gently, his lips soft against hers. "I'll see you in the morning," he said, "and every morning after that if you'll have me." "I'll have you." Helena's smile was radiant. "I'll definitely have you." Isaac was still there the next morning, and the morning after that, and all the mornings that followed. He moved his few belongings from his campsite into a small room he rented above the general store, close enough to Helena to protect her, but far enough to maintain propriety. Alta was a small town, and gossip spread quickly, but most folks seemed to approve of the match between the determined young woman and the mountain man who had clearly fallen for her. They worked the mine together every day, falling into an easy rhythm. Isaac's strength made the heavy work easier, but Helena held her own, her body adapting to the physical demands. And slowly, steadily, they began to pull decent ore from the mine. Not enough to make them rich, but enough to make a living, which was all Helena had wanted anyway. The threat of the Rustlers faded as the weeks passed. Isaac kept a careful watch, but the scarred man and his gang never reappeared in Alta, Eventually, word came that they had been arrested 2 towns over for trying to steal horses from a cavalry outpost, which suggested they would not be a problem for a long time. With that threat gone, Isaac could have left. He could have returned to his solitary life in the mountains. But he stayed, and as summer turned to fall, Helena understood that he was staying not out of obligation, but out of choice. He had found something in Alta, in her, that was worth more than his freedom. One evening in early October, they were sitting outside the cabin watching the aspens turn gold when Isaac took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, "about this mine, and this claim, and the future." "What about it?" Helena leaned against his shoulder, savoring the solid warmth of him. "Your uncle left this claim to you. It's in your name. But if we're going to keep working it together, if we're going to build a life here together, maybe it should be in both our names." He paused. "Which means maybe we should make things official." Helena's heart skipped. "Official how?" Isaac turned to face her, and Helena saw nervousness in his expression, which was so unusual for him that it made her smile. "Helena Dawson, I'm not good with words. I'm better with axes and picks and living rough in the mountains. But you make me want to be better. You make me want to build something permanent. You make me want to stay in one place for the rest of my life, as long as that place is wherever you are." He took a breath. "Will you marry me?" Helena felt tears spill down her cheeks, but she was smiling so wide it hurt. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Isaac's answering smile was brilliant, transforming his weathered face. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Helena thought she might burst from sheer happiness. A month ago she had been alone in the world, terrified and uncertain. Now she had a home, a livelihood, and a man who loved her. It felt like a miracle. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Alta. Mrs. Fletcher cried through the entire service, and half the town turned out to celebrate. Jake and Samuel Parker stood up as witnesses, and Arthur Mills from the assay office gave Helena away since she had no family. It was not fancy, but it was perfect, and when Isaac slipped a simple gold band on her finger and promised to love her for the rest of his life, Helena knew she had finally found where she belonged. They moved into the cabin at the mine full-time after the wedding. It was rough living compared to Mrs. Fletcher's comfortable boarding house, but Helena loved it. She loved waking up next to Isaac in the loft, loved making breakfast together in the small kitchen, loved working side by side during the day, and sitting by the fire together at night. Isaac proved to be a devoted husband. He was gentle and patient, teaching Helena not just about mining, but about surviving in the mountains, about reading the weather and tracking game and living off the land. He made her laugh with dry observations about the other miners. He held her when she cried, missing her parents. He kissed her every morning and every night, and random times during the day when the mood struck him. And the physical side of their marriage was a revelation. Helena had been nervous, knowing nothing about what happened between a husband and wife. But Isaac was patient and tender, making her first time as beautiful as it could be. And after that first time, the passion between them only grew. Isaac worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, drawing sounds from her she had not known she could make, and Helena learned to touch him in return, to map the hard muscles of his chest and shoulders, to make him groan and tighten beneath her hands. Winter came, and the mine work slowed as snow filled the canyon. But Isaac had been preparing for this, stockpiling firewood and food, making sure the cabin was well insulated and secure. They spent the long winter evenings reading by firelight, or talking, or making love beneath heavy quilts while the wind howled outside. "I never knew it could be like this," Helena said one night, lying in Isaac's arms after they had exhausted themselves with passion. "I never knew I could be this happy." Isaac's hand stroked through her hair. "Neither did I. I spent so long alone, I forgot what it felt like to have someone to come home to, someone to share everything with." "Do you miss the mountains, the wandering?" "Sometimes I miss the silence," Isaac admitted, "but then you talk to me, or smile at me, or just exist in the same space as me, and I remember why I gave that up. This is better. You're better." Spring came eventually, and they returned to steady work at the mine. The vein of silver ore continued, and Helena learned to process some of the ore herself using a small hand crusher Isaac built. It was painstaking work, but the silver they produced brought decent money, enough to improve the cabin and put aside savings. In early summer, Helena realized she had missed her monthly courses. She told Isaac one evening after supper, watching his face carefully. "You're pregnant?" His voice was hushed, almost reverent. "I think so. I'm not certain yet, but all the signs are there." Isaac's face transformed, his smile so wide and genuine that Helena felt her eyes prick with tears. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, as if she might break. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Helena asked, needing to hear it. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. Isaac pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes shining. "Helena, you've given me everything, a home, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning. And now you're giving me a family. How could I be anything but ecstatic?" Helena gave birth in late January, aided by Mrs. Fletcher and the town doctor. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Isaac, pacing outside the cabin, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, a baby's cry split the air, and the doctor emerged to tell him he had a son. Isaac entered the cabin to find Helena exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. His son. Their son. "His name is Jacob," Helena said softly. "After my father, Jacob Henry. Do you like it?" Isaac could not speak. He just nodded, his eyes burning with unshed tears, and reached out with one large calloused hand to touch the baby's impossibly soft cheek. Jacob was tiny and red and perfect, and when his eyes fluttered open, Isaac saw they were dark like his own. "He's beautiful," Isaac managed finally. "You're both beautiful." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Isaac took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else, learning to change diapers and soothe a crying baby and rock Jacob to sleep. Helena watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again, seeing this new side of the strong, silent mountain man, tender and gentle and completely besotted with his child. They worked the mine less those first few months, focusing instead on their new family. But as Jacob grew stronger and more independent, they returned to regular work, taking turns so one of them was always with the baby. The mine continued to produce, and their savings grew. They added a second room to the cabin for Jacob, and Isaac built a proper barn for Saffron and Storm and the two new horses they had acquired. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and Jacob's growth. He was a bright, curious boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's determination. When he was old enough, Isaac began teaching him about the mountains, about tracking and hunting and surviving, while Helena taught him to read and write and do arithmetic. When Jacob was 5, Helena gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Charlotte. Isaac took one look at his daughters and declared himself completely undone. He doted on them shamelessly, his gruff exterior melting completely in the face of their giggles and baby smiles. Helena watched him braid their hair with the same capable hands that swung a pick in the mine and thought she had never loved him more. The mine continued to produce steadily over the years. It never made them wealthy, but it provided a good living, enough to expand the cabin into a proper house, enough to buy more horses and start a small breeding program with Saffron's bloodline, enough to save for the children's futures. Other miners came and went, but Isaac and Helena stayed, becoming fixtures in Alta, respected members of the community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Helena rode up to the spot where they had first met, where she had been cornered by rustlers, and he had appeared like an avenging angel. The trail looked the same, pine trees towering overhead, the sound of wind in the branches. "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked, leaning against Isaac as they sat on a fallen log. "Giving up your freedom for this life?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, and Helena's heart clenched, afraid of his answer. Then he turned to her, his weathered face breaking into the smile she loved so much. "Helena, that day I saw you surrounded by those rustlers. I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I thought I'd give up my horse, see you safely to town, and go back to my old life. I had no idea I was about to meet the person who would change everything." He took her hand, his thumb tracing over the gold band she still wore. "I didn't give up my freedom. I traded loneliness for love, aimless wandering for purpose, cold nights alone for warm nights with you. That's not a sacrifice. That's the best deal I ever made." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I know." Isaac pulled her close, his arms strong and safe around her. "And I love you. Every single day I love you more than the day before." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Helena thought about the terrified woman she had been 10 years ago, alone and desperate, about to lose everything. She thought about how one act of courage from a stranger had changed the entire trajectory of her life. But Isaac was not a stranger anymore. He was her husband, her partner, the father of her children, the other half of her heart. He was home. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Jacob grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the mountains as much as his father did. The twins grew into spirited girls who had their mother's independence and their father's quiet strength. The mine eventually played out after 18 years, the silver vein thinning to nothing, but by then Isaac and Helena had built other sources of income. The horse breeding program was thriving, with buyers coming from as far as California to purchase foals from Saffron's bloodline. Isaac worked as a guide, leading hunting parties through the mountains he knew so well. Helena took in boarders during the busy mining season, using skills she had learned from Mrs. Fletcher. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and harder winters. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, tempered by years of shared experience and mutual respect. On a cold December evening when Helena was in her mid-50s, she and Isaac sat by the fire in their comfortable home, watching snow fall outside the window. Their children were grown now, Jacob married with children of his own, working a claim in the next valley over. Emma living in Salt Lake City, married to a teacher. Charlotte running a successful mercantile in Alta with her husband. The house felt too quiet sometimes, but Helena loved these evenings alone with Isaac, the two of them comfortable in the silence. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his voice still deep despite his years. "How lucky I am." Helena leaned her head on his shoulder. "How one terrible day turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." Isaac's arm came around her, holding her close. "You mean the day I stole your heart by giving away my horse?" Helena laughed. "You didn't steal it. I gave it willingly, although I'll admit the horse sacrifice was a good opening move. I should have given away 2 horses, might have won you over faster. You won me over plenty fast as it was." Helena tilted her head to kiss him softly. "I knew that first week. When you stayed to teach me about the mine, when you looked at me like I was something precious, I knew then I was going to love you for the rest of my life." "Good." Isaac's eyes crinkled in the smile she still loved after all these years. "Because I'm planning to stick around for a while yet. Can't leave my wife to run things alone. She might do something crazy like work a mine by herself or breed Arabian horses in the middle of the mountains. She already did those things, and she did them with you by her side." Helena's fingers laced through his. "That's what made them possible. That's what made everything possible." They sat together in the firelight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of love and purpose. Outside, snow continued to fall on the mountains Isaac had once roamed alone. But he was not alone anymore, and he never would be again. Years later, when Isaac was in his late 60s, he fell ill. It was his heart, the doctor said, worn out from years of hard living. Helena nursed him through that final winter, their children taking turns coming to help, and Isaac faced the end with the same quiet courage he had brought to everything else in his life. On a bright March morning, with Helena holding his hand and sunlight streaming through the window, Isaac Adler drew his last breath. His final words were, "Best deal I ever made." Helena grieved, as anyone would grieve losing their other half, but she did not regret a single day of their life together. They had had 35 years of marriage, 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and more love than most people experienced in twice that time. Isaac had given her everything: safety, partnership, passion, family, and a love so deep it had transformed them both. She continued to live in the house they had built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren, watching Saffron's descendants run in the pastures, telling stories about the mountain man who had saved her life and then stayed to share it. And every night, before she slept, Helena would touch the gold band she still wore and whisper, "Best deal I ever made, too." Helena lived to be 83, still sharp and independent to the end. When she finally passed peacefully in her sleep one autumn night, she was buried beside Isaac on a hill overlooking the valley they had made their home. Their children carved a simple epitaph on the shared headstone, "Together, forever, as they always wanted." But their love did not end with death. It lived on in their descendants, in the horses that still carried Saffron's bloodline, in the stories told around fires about the woman who refused to give up and the mountain man who gave up everything to help her. It lived on in the small museum Alta eventually built, featuring artifacts from the early mining days, including a battered lantern that had belonged to Isaac Adler and a set of mining tools that bore Helena's initials. Most of all, their love lived on in the example they had set. That sometimes courage means accepting help, that sometimes strength means staying when it would be easier to leave, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is give up what you thought you wanted to gain something far more precious. The Rustlers had wanted her horse. The mountain man gave them his instead and rode with her to safety. And in doing so, Isaac Adler found what he had been searching for all along, even though he had not known he was searching. He found home. He found purpose. He found love. And Helena found the same things: a home in the mountains, a purpose in the mine and the horses, and a love that transformed her from a frightened woman on a trail to a confident matriarch whose legacy would endure for generations. In the end, it all came back to that moment on the mountain trail. 4 men wanting to take something, 1 man willing to give instead, and a woman brave enough to accept help and strong enough to return it. That moment had changed 2 lives irrevocably, had created a family that would span generations, had proven that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. The mine was gone now, long since closed. The cabin had been replaced by a modern house that Helena's great-grandchildren lived in. Even Alta itself had changed, growing from a rough mining town into a thriving ski resort. But on that hill overlooking the valley, 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of Isaac Adler and Helena Dawson Adler, and people still came to visit, still left flowers, still touched the carved words and wondered about the love story they represented. Because some love stories are too powerful to be forgotten. Some love stories become legend, passed down through families and communities, inspiring others to be brave, to be generous, to be open to the possibility that help might come from unexpected places, and love might be found in the most unlikely circumstances. Isaac and Helena's story was one of those love stories. It had started with danger and sacrifice, grown through hard work and mutual respect, deepened through shared joys and sorrows, and endured beyond death itself. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, rugged and real, passionate and practical, built on a foundation of courage and sustained by daily choice. And it all began because Rustlers wanted her horse, and a mountain man gave them his instead. That simple act of generosity had rippled outward like a stone thrown in a still pond, changing everything it touched. It had saved Helena's life, altered Isaac's path, created a family, built a legacy, and proved that sometimes the most important thing you can do is help a stranger in need. Because you never know. That stranger might become the love of your life. That moment of crisis might become the beginning of your greatest adventure. That sacrifice might be the best investment you ever make. Isaac Adler had known this instinctively when he saw Helena surrounded by Rustlers. He had not thought about himself, had not calculated costs and benefits. He had simply seen someone in trouble and acted to help them, giving up something valuable to protect someone vulnerable. And Helena had recognized his gift for what it was, not just the sacrifice of a horse, but an offering of safety, respect, and ultimately love. She had been brave enough to accept it, strong enough to honor it, and wise enough to build on it. Together, they had created something beautiful from a moment of danger. Together, they had proven that love can bloom even in the hardest soil, that partnership can thrive even in the roughest circumstances, that family can be built even from the smallest beginnings. Their story was over now, their lives complete, their love immortalized in memory and stone. But the lessons they taught lived on, whispered by the wind in the mountain pines, reflected in the eyes of horses running free in high pastures, embodied in the descendants who carried their names and their legacy forward. Courage, generosity, love, partnership, perseverance, family, legacy. These were the gifts Isaac and Helena had given each other and the world. These were the treasures that outlasted silver and gold, that endured beyond a single lifetime, that made their love story one worth remembering and retelling. And it all began on a mountain trail in 1878, when Rustlers wanted her horse, and a mountain man gave them his instead and rode with her to safety, not knowing that he was riding toward his destiny, toward the love that would define him, toward the home he had been seeking all his life without realizing it. In the end, that is what all the best love stories teach us, that love finds us when we least expect it, that it requires sacrifice and courage, that it grows through shared experience, and that it leaves a legacy that outlasts our mortal lives. Isaac and Helena's love story had all of this and more. It was a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of helping a stranger, the courage of accepting help, and the transformative power of two people who choose each other every single day. They had built a life from nothing, had loved each other through everything, and had left behind something precious, proof that love can conquer all, that courage matters, that generosity returns tenfold, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is give up what you have to gain what you need. The Rustlers had wanted her horse. The mountain man gave them his instead. And in that exchange, two souls found each other and created a love that would echo through generations, inspiring others to be brave, to be generous, to be open to love in all its unexpected forms. That was the real treasure, more valuable than any silver mine, more precious than any horse, more enduring than any mountain. That was the legacy of Isaac and Helena Adler, a love story that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments, and sometimes help arrives exactly when you need it, wearing buckskin and long hair and carrying a rifle, ready to sacrifice everything for someone who will become everything. And they lived happily ever after, not because their life was easy, but because they faced it together, building something beautiful from a moment of crisis, creating a legacy of love that would inspire others for generations to come. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. And somewhere on a mountain trail in Utah, the wind still whispers their names, carrying their love story forward into the future, reminding us all that courage and generosity and love are the greatest treasures we can possess.